Thank you so much for joining us. Earlier this summer, we introduced you to Mike Keneally, a former cabinet secretary under Governor Charlie Baker, who's running for the Republican nomination for governor. Well, now I'd like you to meet another announced candidate for that nomination, Brian Shortsleeve, a graduate of Harvard College and Harvard Business School who served in the Marine Corps as an officer in Bosnia and the Persian Gulf before a career in business and then as a top official at the MBTA under Governor Baker. Brian, welcome. Good to have you here.
John, nice to be here again. Thanks for having me.
Okay, yeah, we had you here back in your role at the T. But let's reintroduce you to our viewers. Are you a Charlie Baker Republican?
Look, John, I am a proud Marine. I'm a proven government reformer. I'm a devoted dad of three boys, and I'm a successful business leader. I don't tend to take my direction or my inspiration from elected politicians. For me, my hero when I was growing up was my grandfather, who was a Naval Academy grad and served in World War II. When my time came, I got out of Harvard, I joined the Marine Corps. I think the most important lessons I learned about life, about leadership, I learned as an officer in the Marine Corps.
Well, you were, I believe, a state co-chairman of the DeSantis campaign in the last presidential race, correct?
That's right.
And you voted for President Trump.
Yeah, I supported the Republican ticket.
You did.
up and down the ticket this
Well,
time.
you know, President Trump famously referred to Charlie Baker on multiple occasions as a rhino. Do you think Charlie Baker was a rhino?
You know, Charlie Baker did some great things for Massachusetts. He held the line on taxes. The Baker administration created 300,000 private sector jobs in that 8 years. By the way, under Maura Healey in the last 3 years, we haven't created a single private sector job. Baker also was a strong opponent of sanctuary state policies. He vetoed the illegal immigrant driver's license. So Baker did some great things. I think at the end of Baker's term, some things were done that I disagreed with. I thought that the economy stayed closed for far too long in COVID. I think that did lasting damage to our business climate and to our schools. I also think the MBTA Communities Act was a mistake. And the beginning of the migrant shelter program started in the summer of 2022, and obviously under Maura Healey's, it become an enormous problem for the state to the tune of $3 million a day.
You mentioned the MBTA Communities Act. Let's talk about that for a minute. You've said you'll push to repeal it if you're elected because it's a one-size-fits-all answer. That's your quote. To the housing crisis. But as you know, what it does is it requires cities and towns served by the T to allow multifamily zoning near public transit in at least one district. If you won't support that, how are you going to combat the NIMBYism that plays such a big role in preventing affordable housing development?
Look, everybody wants more housing. And when I was at the MBTA, we built thousands of units up and down the Red Line in places like Quincy. But we did it on state-owned land that the T owned. We worked with developers, we worked with communities, and we did it in areas where the communities want the housing. The MBTA Communities Act is a one-size-fits-all approach. It's administrative overreach, and it doesn't respect the local infrastructure requirements, local school requirements. So I oppose the MBTA Communities Act because I think it's an example of sort of a stick approach versus a carrot approach. What I would do and what I will do when I'm governor is what I did when I ran the T, which is take all that state-owned land and use it to drive housing. There's 100,000 acres of state-owned land in greater Boston that we could start with and we'd create a lot of housing on.
Are you telling me you don't believe that NIMBYism is a factor in stunting housing development?
Look, I think we need to leave it up to local communities to control local zoning. A lot of communities have unique infrastructure needs and requirements around waste, around schools. So I don't think that the state should be forcing local communities to build housing if they feel that they can't support it. What I will tell you is that the state owns hundreds of thousands of acres of vacant land in and around the city of Boston. We could use that land. I did it at the T. There's ways to work with communities to build housing, but I think the MBTA Communities Act is the wrong approach.
All right. On that note, let's take our break, and when we return, we'll talk about some of the other big issues facing the state with Republican candidate for Governor Brian Shortsleeve. So, stay with us. Welcome back to our conversation with Republican gubernatorial candidate Brian Shortsleeve. And Brian, the quote-unquote big, beautiful bill. State officials estimate up to 326,000 residents of Massachusetts could lose their mass health coverage. You okay with that?
Look, when I look at the big, beautiful bill, there were some things in there that I really support. There's billions of dollars on border security, and I think that's a good thing for this country. That border is secure. And who would have known that Massachusetts could become a border state? Maura Healey has spent over $3 million a day in the past 3 years on the migrant shelter crisis. When I'm governor, it will end. So I think in the big beautiful bill, that's a big plus. When it comes to our state Medicaid system, our state Medicaid system is now over $25 billion. It is the largest part of our budget. And I think we've got to be looking at every part of state government to control spending. State spending's up 50%, John, in 6 years, and state Medicaid is driving the way.
You think 326,000 mass health recipients are deadbeats or waste?
What I will tell you is I think we've got to enforce the rules. We've got to go through every part of that program and understand eligibility. Mass health has continued to grow in terms of its size. We've got over 2.2 million people now on mass health. It is a budget buster. When I'm governor, we will go through every part of that program, make sure the people who are on mass health are eligible for mass health. But I think from a sustainability standpoint, we've got to get spending in this state under control. We cannot continue to grow our state budget at 8 or 9% in a world where our revenues are flattening.
Now, you recently took or signed, I should say, the Americans for Tax Reform No New Taxes Pledge. And that's a promise to never support a tax increase that isn't matched by a tax cut, dollar for dollar. So what happens if you're governor and the Trump administration cuts the funding for the Cape Bridge repairs? You're going to abandon that project?
Well, look, we need to end the era of Taxachusetts, John. Our taxes are too high. I'm a businessman. I spent my whole life in the private sector building businesses. And this state has always worked better when you got a businessman in the corner office. And I'll tell you, across the board, whether it's income tax, whether it's the estate tax, whether it's unemployment insurance tax, what you find in Massachusetts is our high taxes are driving people and businesses out of the state. Can you imagine that this state is now 49th out of 50 in private sector job growth? Taxes is one of the big reasons. When I'm governor, we'll end the era of Taxachusetts. We will fight to lower all of those taxes. And I think we have to get our economy
What about my
back and
question,
growing.
though? Would you abandon the Cape Bridge project if the feds cut the funding?
No.
And it might require new revenues to pay for it?
No, that Cape Bridge project is a critical project. But I tell you, there's $65 billion now, or excuse me, $62 billion in our state budget. There's plenty of money in our state budget to deliver a great set of services. What you see with our state budget has just been a tremendous amount of growth. I mean, it's grown by 50% over 6 years. So I know if I was governor, we can find plenty of money in that budget to do the things that we need to do. But there's also tremendous waste and abuse, and I saw that firsthand when I was at the T.
I want to squeeze in one more topic here before we have to wrap. Brian, you mentioned the situation with immigration. I think most people are applauding the identification, arrest, and removal of violent criminals from our population. But, you know, there have been other incidents where ICE has rounded up people. The Tufts student, Rumeysa Ozturk, who was here legally until her visa was revoked, apparently for criticizing Israel's military strategy. She was held for 6 weeks, then released without being charged. Are you okay with that?
Well, look, she went through due process. I believe, as you said, she was released. I think we got to take a worst first approach.
6 weeks in the slammer doesn't really strike me as a fair process.
We need to take a worst first approach. My focus as governor will be on what I can control. I can't control the federal government. What I can control are policies in this state that I think are very damaging. I oppose sanctuary state policies. I think our state government should be cooperating with ICE. 790 people in Boston were picked up in ICE raids a month ago, and most of those folks were convicted criminals in other states and other countries who have been in and out of our court system. If we were cooperating with the government at the courthouse door, we would be deporting them.
Let me clarify. If you're governor, ICE comes in, as Tom Homan, the head of ICE, has said he wants to bring hell to Boston. They round up a bunch of people. Some are bad. Some may not be. As governor, you're just going to throw up your hands. I can't control what they do.
When I'm governor, I will cooperate with the federal government. When I'm governor, we will cooperate with the federal. We will honor detainers. Most of the people the federal government is doing raids to find are people that have been in and out of our court system. There's hundreds of people being released in our court system all the time that have
Yeah.
detainers. And I think when I'm governor, we will sort that out the courthouse door. We'll work with ICE. I don't think a lot of these raids will be necessary because the raids are happening because our local law enforcement isn't cooperating with the federal government to deport people that we know are convicted criminals. They're in our system, but we won't honor.
I'm not
as
hearing you
detainers.
say you'd go to bat for wrongly arrested or detained citizens.
I support due process, absolutely.
Okay.
And I would absolutely fight for anyone who's wrongly detained. But I think it's the responsibility of the governor and the mayor to cooperate with the federal government. And if we were cooperating, the federal government wouldn't be here doing raids.
We're looking forward to hearing much, much more from you as this campaign unfolds. Look forward to having you debate your Republican opponents, whoever they may be, at the appropriate time. And then, if you're the nominee, debate Governor Healy. Look forward to all of that, Brian. Good luck.
Thank you, John. Good to see you today.
Thank you for being here.
You bet.
That's Brian Shortsleeve, Republican candidate for governor. That's all my time.